Today we'll be looking into a Warlock build that will grant you insane health regen, constant radiant, and insane ad clear, all while making you unkillable. Today's build guide will cover all the essentials for the build, including the build layout, recommended exotics and armor mods, recommended armor stats, and more. You can find the dim link for this build in the description below, so with that being said, I'm SniperKH and let's get into the video. Let's open first with what subclass layout to pair with this build. For this build, you'll need the solar subclass on the Warlock. The subclass layout you'll want to copy is on screen now, but most of this layout is important to understand, so let's go through it all one by one. For the super, I opted for Well of Radiance as it is still the best solar super in the game. For my class ability, I chose Phoenix Dive as it grants you a quick heal when you complete the dive, and is also crucial to up the survivability of this build as we will discuss momentarily. For your melee, it is up to you, but I'd highly recommend Celestial Fire, as this will give you a ranged ability option to help with extend restoration and radiance timers as needed. For the grenade, I chose Healing Grenade as it provides a strong heal for us, though we might not use this too much thanks to one of our aspects. The stars of this subclass layout, however, come from the aspects. I find that Hellion and Heat Rises are perfect pairings for this build. Hellion provides you with a solar buddy that will fire mortar-like projectiles at enemies, scorching them on detonation, which will allow us to get extra use from one of our fragments. For Heat Rises, it allows us to float in the air and have near perfect accuracy when in the air, but the neat thing about this aspect is the small inclusion it has. When you consume your grenade to activate Heat Rises and then immediately Phoenix Dive, you'll upgrade the heals that Heat Rises gives you from Cure ×2 to Restoration ×2, giving you one of the strongest heals in the game for a small price. This simple trick will elevate this build to a new level that is essentially for skyrocketing your survivability. For your fragments, Ember of Mercy, Ember of Empyrean, Ember of Solace, and Ember of Singeing are the fragments you should select. Ember of Mercy will be helpful for this build as it'll grant you restoration for picking up fire sprites or for reviving a teammate, which gives you another source of bonus healing. Ember of Empyrean is important in order to extend the duration of your restoration and radiant buffs, as solar weapon or ability kills will extend the timer. This also synergizes fairly well with Heat Rises as solar weapon kills extends Heat Rises timer. Ember of Solace will also be useful, as the increase to the timer to both Radiant and Restoration will give you bonus time to take advantage of these buffs and to extend them. Finally, Ember of Singeing will allow us to gain class ability energy back faster thanks to scorching targets, which will happen often thanks to Hellion and our melee. Moving on to the exotics, the one exotic that is required for this build is Eunoia, which is the new exotic gauntlets for the Warlock. The way these gauntlets work is that it allows your Hellion projectiles to do bonus damage the further they travel, while also letting them split into multiple smaller projectiles that will track targets. Despite the gameplay we were shown before the Edge of Fate's release, this exotic is actually really solid and super fun to use, and this build just emphasizes its power. For an exotic weapon, there isn't one that is required for this build. That being said, solar weapons will be fantastic with this build, and I'd highly urge you to use one that will take advantage of this build. Some of my favorite picks to pair with this build are Sunshot, Eartide Apex, which is the new solar SMG, Ahab Car, which drops from portal activities, and Return to Memory, which drops from the Crucible. Regardless of which solar weapon you use, I promise that it will be amazing for the build. Next, let's discuss armor mods as they are important for this build. The purpose of our armor mods will be to build our class ability and grenade back as fast as possible. Building our super will also be nice since that means we'll get Well of Radiance quicker, which is always nice, and we want to buff our solar weapons. So because of that, you'll want to run the following. For your helmets, run 2 copies of Dynamo and 1 copy of Harmonic Siphon. Dynamo will allow you to build your super faster, as using your class ability near enemies will grant you bonus super energy. Harmonic Siphon will also be useful as multi-kills with solar weapons will grant you an orb of power, which will allow us to build our abilities back faster, while also buffing our weapons. For the gauntlets, consider using 2 copies of Focusing Strike and 1 copy of Solar Weapon Loader. Focusing Strike will grant us bonus class ability energy when damaging combatants with our powered melee ability, which means we'll be getting our class ability back faster. Furthermore, if your powered melee doesn't kill the combatant, you'll be getting extra class ability energy from Ember of Singeing, which is always welcomed. Solar Weapon Loader is self-explanatory, as it will grant us faster reload speeds for our solar weapons. For your chest mods, you'll want to run whatever elemental resistance mods will best aid your survivability, so check whatever activity you're going to run and make changes accordingly. For your boots, consider using 1 copy of Invigoration, 1 copy of Innervation, and 1 copy of Solar Weapon Surge. It might seem puzzling to use a copy of Innervation when we could instead run 2 copies of Innervation for faster grenade cooldowns, and while your confusion is valid, I found that 1 copy of Innervation built my grenade back faster, and I liked having Invigoration to get my melee quicker in case I needed to extend my buff timers on the fly. Furthermore, 1 copy of Solar Weapon Surge will buff our weapon damage by 10%, which is always nice to have. Finally, for our class item, 1 copy of Outreach, 1 copy of Powerful Attraction, and 1 copy of Reaper will round this buff out perfectly. Outreach will grant us bonus melee energy when using our class ability, granting a nice loop between the 2 abilities, while we also get bonuses from using our class's ability, as Powerful Attraction will suck in nearby orbs of power, and Reaper will also grant us an orb of power on our next weapon kill after we use our class ability. To round out the armor mods, I'd recommend picking up Fever and Chill for the free Radiant from Rapid Solar Precision hits, Refresh Threads for bonus ability energy when grabbing a Fire Sprite, Elemental Coalescence for a chance of generating a Fire Sprite on solar weapon kills, Radiant Shrapnel to spawn more solar projectiles on weapon hits when Radiant, and Elemental Overdrive to boost our solar weapon's damage further when we have a Fire Sprite. Moving on, let's discuss armor stats, as armor stats can play a huge part in this build. For this build, I find that the most important stats for this build are Grenade, Class, and Weapon, though I definitely focus Class and Weapon first, then Grenade afterwards. Getting your class stat up to 100 means that you'll have to wait around 19 seconds for your class ability, which will make this build run smoothly. Additionally, bonus points invested into the class stat will grant you an overshield when you use your class ability, which can increase survivability, but don't worry too much if you are not able to increase the stat beyond 100. The weapon stat is also important to focus, as it will grant you a 15% bonus weapon damage to red bar and yellow bar combatants, which is always welcomed. For the grenade stat, the purpose of boosting this stat is to get extra grenade energy, so don't stress if you can't get this stat to 100. Moving on to the combat flow, it's a fairly simple one to follow. For starters, you'll want to consume your grenade to activate Heat Rises. Once you have activated Heat Rises, immediately use Phoenix Dive to upgrade your cure stacks to ×2 restoration. Once you've done this, simply fly into the air and slay out with your melee and solar weapons to extend your timer. It is important to note that if at any time you lose x2 restoration but still have Heat Rises active, and you generate your Phoenix Dive back, you can just Phoenix Dive to reactivate the ×2 restoration, so you don't need to regenerate your grenade for that, so just keep that in mind because it's a massive tip to know to make this build feel better. Overall, this build has been one that has been incredibly fun to use. While it might not be as strong or as broken as other builds currently in the game, it brings enough to the table to be a fun build to take into most content and does surprisingly well in in-game content, so be sure to give this a try. Well, that'll wrap up today's video. If you found it helpful, a like rating would be greatly appreciated, and consider subscribing to the channel for more Destiny 2 content dropping weekly. If you'd like to come catch me live, you can do so over at twitch.tv/SniperKH_, where I stream most weekdays, so stop by and say what's up. Otherwise, be sure to check out my other social media platforms, including my Discord server, where I'll be hosting community events once we get enough members. With that being said, I'm SniperKH, and I'm out. Good luck with gaming.